The super empath who shattered the Playboy's mask. You know the type. Charming smile, smooth talker, always seems just a little out of reach. The Playboy. He's mastered the art of mystery, allure, and superficial affection. He knows exactly what to say to make you feel special until you realize it wasn't special at all. But then came her, the woman he didn't see coming, the super empath. She wasn't just kind, she was deep. She didn't fall for his surface appeal. She saw through it. Where others were dazzled by his charisma, she noticed his patterns. She didn't chase validation, she radiated self-worth. And here's the kicker. She wasn't trying to change him. She was just being her whole, emotionally intelligent, grounded self. And that was the most disruptive thing she could have done. Because you see, for the first time, the Playboy felt seen. Not as a fantasy, but as a flawed human being. His tricks didn't work on her. His mask didn't protect him anymore. And suddenly he had to ask himself, who am I without this game? You don't attract someone's soul by losing yourself. You attract someone's soul by owning yours. And that's exactly what she did. She didn't try to fix him. She didn't beg for breadcrumbs. She held her standards like a lighthouse in a storm. And he had two choices: rise to meet her or get washed away. And that, my friends, is the real power of the super empath. Not weakness, not overgiving, but a mirror so clear that even the most guarded heart can't look away. We often mistake charm for depth because charm is loud, it dazzles, flatters, and draws attention like a magnet. A charming person can make you feel like the only one in the room, like you're special, chosen, seen. It's intoxicating. But that feeling, as powerful as it is, can be misleading. Charm isn't necessarily rooted in authenticity. It can be a performance, rehearsed, refined, and strategically deployed to create connection without offering any real intimacy. The Playboy archetype understands this well. He has mastered the art of creating emotional highs without ever becoming emotionally available. He says all the right things, uses vulnerability like seasoning, just enough to appear deep, but never enough to be truly known. He knows how to mimic connection, and he's learned that most people don't look beyond the surface because they're too swept up in how they feel around him. But feelings, especially in the early stages, are not always rooted in reality. They're often a response to novelty, flattery, or unmet emotional needs. The Playboy feeds those needs, but never actually nourishes them. Here's where it gets dangerous. We live in a world where many people have been conditioned to accept emotional breadcrumbs as a full meal. They've grown used to confusing excitement with compatibility. So when someone comes along who's thrilling and attentive for a moment, it's easy to believe that you've found something rare. But depth doesn't show up in fleeting gestures. It reveals itself over time in consistency, in how someone shows up when it's inconvenient, in how they handle truth, conflict, and your boundaries. A deeply connected partner doesn't just want to be liked. They want to be known, and they want to know you in return. That requires vulnerability, openness, and the kind of emotional honesty that can't be faked. Charm can't sustain that. Eventually, the cracks begin to show. The charming words begin to repeat. The patterns become predictable. The emotional unavailability becomes obvious to anyone willing to pause and look past the sparkle. What fools most people is not the lack of signs, but the refusal to question what feels good. The Playboy thrives in the emotional blind spot created by unhealed needs. Until someone with true emotional clarity walks in, someone who isn't seduced by fireworks because they're looking for firewood, that's the difference. Charm can start something, but only depth can sustain it. And charm without substance? That's just noise. The super empath doesn't fall for appearances because they've trained themselves, consciously or not, to observe what's beneath the surface. They don't just hear what someone says. They feel the space between the words. They notice the pauses, the contradictions, the inconsistency. While others are swept up in charisma, the super empath is quietly tuning into the emotional frequency behind a mask. They've spent years navigating emotional landscapes, not just in others, but within themselves. That self-awareness becomes their filter. It keeps them grounded, even when someone's charm threatens to pull them off center. When they meet the playboy, they may initially be intrigued, but the intrigue doesn't blind them. They can enjoy the dance, but they're watching closely. They know what emotional congruence looks like. They know what it feels like when words and actions align, and more importantly, they know the hollow echo of someone pretending to connect. The playboy's script doesn't work on them the way it usually does. He's used to admiration. He's used to being chased. But the super empath, chased, they observe, they listen. They pick up on the slight hesitation in his story, the lack of follow-through in his intentions, the way he's always slightly unavailable, always slightly out of reach. And it's not that the super empath is cynical or guarded, quite the opposite. They lead with openness, but it's paired with discernment. Their emotional depth gives them a kind of quiet radar for inauthenticity. They don't need someone to be perfect, they just need them to be real. So when the playboy tries to spin a narrative, when he offers affection with no foundation, or when he creates intimacy without consistency, the empath feels it immediately, not just in their mind, but in their nervous system. Something feels off. And unlike others who might ignore that feeling, the super empath trusts it. This emotional perception can be unnerving to someone who's used to hiding behind a mask. The playboy thrives when he's in control of the illusion. But when someone reflects him back to himself, when someone doesn't fall for the fantasy, it destabilizes him. Suddenly, he's not admired. He's being seen. And being seen can feel like exposure when you're not ready to be known. That's the quiet power of the super empath. They don't confront the mask with aggression. They simply don't engage with it. They speak to the real person behind it. And for someone who's never had to show up authentically, that's a confrontation in itself. There is something undeniably magnetic about someone who knows their worth. Not in an arrogance or performative way, but in a grounded, quiet confidence that doesn't beg for validation. That kind of presence shifts the energy in any room. It's not loud, but it's unmistakable. The super empath embodies this. They don't need to prove themselves to be loved. They already live from the belief that they are inherently valuable, and that belief changes everything. When someone like a playboy enters the picture, he's used to gaining power through attention. He feeds off the chase, the reaction, the pull-push dynamic that gives him control. But the super empath doesn't play into that. She doesn't need his attention to feel desirable. She doesn't need his approval to feel seen. That throws off the entire script he's used to performing. Suddenly, his usual moves fall flat. The compliments don't land the same way. The mystery doesn't intrigue. It raises question. Because someone who is rooted in self-worth doesn't see emotional unavailability as a challenge. They see it as a red flag. This kind of self-assuredness acts like a filter. It doesn't repel connection, it refines it. People who are aligned with authenticity are drawn in. Those who rely on manipulation or control start to feel uncomfortable. It's like emotional gravity. The empath's self-worth either calls someone higher or pushes them away. And here's the key, they're okay with either outcome. They're not emotionally invested in changing someone to meet their standards. They are simply unwilling to abandon themselves to accommodate someone else's potential. What makes this so powerful is that the super empath is not playing games. They're not withholding to gain leverage. They're just deeply in tune with what they deserve. That kind of clarity is rare, and it commands respect. The playboy, who is used to being the one who sets the emotional tone, suddenly finds himself out of rhythm. He may try harder, say more, promise bigger, but the empath doesn't respond to noise. They respond to alignment. They respond to presence. They respond to consistency. And if those things aren't there, they walk away, not in anger, but in certainty. Self-worth isn't about how loudly you declare your boundaries, it's about how naturally you live by them. The super empath doesn't just say they deserve more, they show it through every decision, every no, every moment they choose themselves. That's where real power lives. There's a common misconception about empathy, that being empathetic means always understanding, always forgiving, always giving people the benefit of the doubt, even when they hurt you. But true empathy, especially when embodied by someone emotionally mature, doesn't mean tolerating disrespect, manipulation, or inconsistency. A super empath understands this distinction deeply. They feel things intensely, yes, but they've also learned the hard way that love without boundaries isn't love. It's self-abandonment. The super empath knows how to hold space for someone's pain, but they also know when that pain is being used as an excuse for harmful behavior. They can sense the difference between someone who's emotionally wounded and trying to grow versus someone who is emotionally unavailable and using their wounds to justify selfishness. They don't let their empathy become a trap. They've likely been there before, giving too much, forgiving too easily, hoping someone would change. But those past experiences taught them one of their most valuable lessons. Empathy without limits invites emotional chaos. So now, when they meet someone who plays games, someone who shows up inconsistently or tests their emotional patience, they don't overextend themselves trying to prove they're worthy of love. They don't spiral into self-doubt. They step back, they observe, they enforce boundaries, not because they're harsh, but because they've come to honor their peace. Their empathy is still there, but it no longer leads them into emotional danger. It protects them from it. This can be confusing for the person on the receiving end, especially someone like the playboy who's used to empathy meaning forgiveness. He might expect the super empath to tolerate emotional hot and cold behavior, to chase him when he withdraws, or to overanalyze his mixed signals. But that doesn't happen. Instead, the empath sets a line, not out of punishment, but out of deep self-respect. They might say, I understand you've been through things, I have compassion for that, but I don't stay in spaces where I feel emotionally unsafe. And that simple boundary is more powerful than any confrontation. It's not reactive, it's not dramatic, it's just firm, clear, and non-negotiable. The super empath doesn't need to raise their voice to be heard. They've done the inner work to trust that their voice matters. Their empathy is no longer a tool for others to exploit. It's a gift they offer selectively, with wisdom and strength. They care deeply, but never again at the expense of themselves. The super empath doesn't walk into someone's life with a mission to change them. They're not driven by a need to fix, rescue, or reshape another person into who they could be. That's the beauty and the challenge of their presence. They offer a kind of emotional clarity that holds up a mirror to the people around them, especially to those who are used to hiding behind personas. For someone like the playboy, who thrives on illusion and performance, being reflected with such honesty can be incredibly confronting. What makes the super empath so powerful is that they don't manipulate, they don't demand, and they don't chase. They simply show up in truth. Their actions match their words, their boundaries are steady, their emotional depth is real, and in doing so, they challenge others to rise. Not through force, but through example. This is what makes their presence so disruptive to someone who isn't used to being called into emotional maturity. The playboy can't rely on his usual tactics because the empath isn't responding to superficiality. She's responding to substance, or walking away if it's not there. When faced with this kind of emotional transparency, the playboy has a choice: evolve or retreat. And make no mistake, transformation, when it happens, is never because someone made it happen. It's because the person chose it. The super empath might be the catalyst, the reason someone finally sees themselves clearly. But the work is always internal. Growth is self-initiated. The empath isn't responsible for it, and they know better than to try to force it. This creates an unexpected power dynamic. The playboy, who's used to being admired and pursued, suddenly feels emotionally naked. For the first time, someone is seeing through the smoke and mirrors. And not only that, this person won't stay unless he shows up authentically. That's a level of pressure he may have never experienced, not because it's being forced on him, but because her standards require realness. Not potential, not charisma, real connection. If he rises, it's because he finally sees the value in becoming someone who can meet her there. If he doesn't, it's because he's not ready. And the super empath won't stick around waiting. Her worth is not attached to whether someone chooses to grow. She's not looking for a project, she's looking for a partner. That line alone separates emotional maturity from emotional fantasy. She is the mirror. But the reflection and the choice to face it is never hers to make. So in the end, it wasn't drama that changed him. It wasn't manipulation, seduction, or ego games. It was presence. It was clarity. It was a woman so grounded in her truth that his illusions simply couldn't survive around her. She didn't beg for his love. She didn't try to fix him. She loved with depth. But she loved herself more. That kind of energy is rare. It doesn't try to prove its worth. It simply is worthy. And when someone like that enters your life, you're left with a choice: grow or lose them. He saw, maybe for the first time, what real connection could feel like. Not just adrenaline, not just attraction, but accountability, intimacy, authenticity. Whether he changed or not is his journey. But she never needed him to. She didn't win him, she found herself. And that was always the real victory. To anyone listening, be that person who doesn't lose themselves trying to be enough for someone who hasn't yet found themselves. Protect your peace, trust your empathy, but honor your boundaries. And remember this, you don't have to break your own heart just to get someone to see your value. You simply have to stop offering it to those who can't meet you there. Thank you for giving me your time, your presence, and your heart tonight. Be bold in your self-worth. Be soft in your spirit. And above all, never shrink to fit inside someone else's limited capacity to love. Thank you, and take care.